The night I found out, I was doing something completely ordinary. I was standing in the kitchen of our house in Charlotte, North Carolina, sorting through the dry cleaning Marcus had dropped off earlier that week. It was a Tuesday in March. Rain streaked the window above the sink. The house smelled like the dinner I had cooked alone. Again. I slid my hand into the breast pocket of his gray blazer, the way I always did before hanging it up, and my fingers found something. A folded receipt. Small. Slightly crumpled, like someone had shoved it in quickly. I almost didn't look at it. I almost set it on the counter beside his loose change and his business cards. But I looked. It was a receipt from a pediatric clinic. Not our pediatrician. Not in Charlotte. In Raleigh, 45 minutes away. The date was 3 weeks earlier, the same weekend Marcus had told me he was in Atlanta for a consulting conference. The child's name on the file reference was listed as a patient of Marcus A. Holloway, our last name. But we didn't have a child in Raleigh. Our kids were grown, both in college, both very much alive and accounted for. I stood at that counter for a long time. The rain kept falling. The kitchen clock kept ticking. I put the receipt in my cardigan pocket, hung the blazer up, and went to bed. I did not sleep. If you have never had the feeling that everything you believed about your life was sitting on quicksand, stay with me. What I'm about to tell you took me 3 years to unravel, and what I found was worse than anything I could have imagined. Subscribe right now and turn on notifications. You do not want to lose this story halfway through. My name is Diane. I was 47 years old, and I had been married to Marcus Holloway for 16 years. On paper, we were the couple people admired. A 4-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood outside Charlotte. Marcus ran a mid-size logistics consulting firm. I was a forensic accountant. I had spent 20 years following money that didn't want to be found. The irony of that never leaves me. We had raised 2 children, built a retirement account, hosted neighborhood dinners. Marcus was charming at those dinners. He had a laugh that filled a room. He remembered everyone's names, their kids' sports teams, their promotions. At home, he was quieter, more distracted. He had a way of dismissing my concerns with a kind of tired patience, like I was asking something too complicated to explain. You always read too much into things, Diane. You're overthinking again. This is why I don't tell you everything. You spiral. I had learned not to ask certain questions. About the trips that ran longer than expected. About the nights he said he'd be working late and came home smelling like hotel soap. I told myself that's what long marriages looked like. That I was being paranoid. I was a forensic accountant. I had built a career on finding things people tried to hide. And I had convinced myself there was nothing to find. 2 weeks after the pediatric clinic receipt, I found the phone. Marcus had left his laptop bag in the hallway when he came home. He'd gone upstairs to shower. I wasn't snooping. I was moving the bag so I wouldn't trip over it in the dark. It slid off the table and hit the floor, and something heavy tumbled out from the small interior pocket. A phone. Not his usual phone. A cheap prepaid. Black. No case. My heart did something I can't fully describe. It dropped. And then it went very, very still. I picked it up. It wasn't locked. The screen opened to a text thread. The contact name was simply Home. The most recent message, sent the night before, read, "She's asking about you again. When are you coming back? She keeps asking me why Daddy doesn't live with us. She." I read backward through the thread. Months of messages. A woman named Renee, a little girl named Avery. Conversations about school pickups, about Avery's ear infection, about a broken water heater Marcus had apparently arranged to have fixed. Conversations that were domestic, practiced, routine. Conversations that told me Marcus had not simply had an affair. He had built a second life. I read until my hands stopped shaking enough to scroll. I read until I understood that this wasn't new, that Avery appeared to be 5 or 6 years old based on context, that Marcus had been maintaining this, a home, a woman, a child, for what seemed like the entire back half of our marriage. I put the phone back exactly where I found it. I zipped the bag exactly as it had been. I went to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and stood at the window looking at the wet street until my face stopped showing what I felt. When Marcus came downstairs, I smiled. I asked him how his day was. I served dinner. And I started planning. She found a burner phone in his bag and put it back exactly where she found it. Drop it in the comments if you would have done the same. And if you are just finding this channel, subscribe right now. This story is only getting deeper. The weeks that followed were the strangest of my life. I went to work. I sat in client meetings and identified discrepancies in financial statements with the same precision I always had. I drove home. I cooked dinner. I answered Marcus's texts. I laughed at his jokes. And underneath every single moment, I was somewhere else entirely. I couldn't tell my friends. Not yet. Not without knowing the full shape of what I was dealing with. I couldn't tell my children. Dropping this into their lives before I had solid ground beneath my feet was something I wasn't willing to do. I slept in the same bed as a man I no longer recognized, and I stared at the ceiling, and I thought about Avery. A little girl who had no idea her father was living a double life. A woman named Renee, who might or might not know she was the second family. There were moments I wanted to scream, moments I wanted to drive to Raleigh and stand on whatever doorstep Marcus had purchased and pound on it until someone answered. But I had spent 20 years following money. And I knew that patience was the only tool that never failed. I also knew something else, something cold and clarifying that settled into me in the middle of one of those sleepless nights. Marcus had made one devastating miscalculation. He had hidden his secrets from a woman who found hidden secrets for a living. I started the way I always start. With numbers. I pulled our joint financial records going back 8 years. Tax returns, bank statements, credit card records, retirement account activity. I did it slowly, late at night, in my home office, with the door closed and the light low. It took me 4 days to find the first account. A business account registered under a shell company, Holloway Meridian Consulting LLC, separate from Marcus's legitimate firm. Over 6 years, he had been routing cash through it in amounts small enough to avoid automatic flags. $12,000 to $15,000 a year. Consistently. Without fail. That money went to a mortgage. In Raleigh. I found the property records next. A 3-bedroom house on a quiet street. Purchased 6 years ago. The deed listed a joint owner. Renee Caldwell Holloway. Holloway. She had taken his name. I sat with that for a long time. He had given her his name, not in a courthouse. There was no marriage record I could find for them in North Carolina, but on a deed. On insurance documents. On what appeared to be school enrollment forms I eventually traced through public record requests. He had made her feel like a wife. I found the life insurance policy next. A separate policy Marcus had taken out 7 years ago. The beneficiary was listed as Renee Caldwell. The secondary beneficiary, Avery Marie Holloway, minor. There was no version of a policy on my husband's life in which my name appeared. I had been erased from the safety net of my own marriage without ever knowing it. His name was on a life insurance policy, and hers was the only one listed as beneficiary. If your jaw just dropped, hit the like button right now. And stay with me, because what I found in those phone records is what blew this entire thing wide open. I requested Marcus's cell phone records. I was still on the account, which he had apparently never thought to change. Buried in months of call logs, I found a number I didn't recognize. Not Renee's number. A different one. Called every few weeks. Always late at night. Always brief. I ran it through a reverse lookup service. The number belonged to a private investigation firm in Greensboro. My husband had been paying someone to watch me. He was not just hiding a second family. He was building a case against her. If this story has you on the edge of your seat, share it with someone right now. And subscribe if you haven't already. The next part is where she stops being a victim and starts being dangerous. I moved quietly. I had learned years ago that in financial fraud cases, the moment a target feels the net closing is the moment they begin destroying evidence. I was not going to give Marcus any such signal. I consulted a divorce attorney, not in Charlotte. In Asheville, 2 hours away. A woman named Patricia, who specialized in high-asset cases and had a reputation for surgical precision. I paid her in cash from a personal savings account I had maintained in my name only since before the marriage. Patricia listened to everything I had uncovered. She didn't look shocked. She looked focused. "We're going to need a forensic audit," she said. I smiled for the first time in weeks. "I am the forensic audit," I told her. I began making copies of everything. Not on our home computer. On a laptop I purchased with cash at an electronics store 40 miles away. Encrypted. Backed up to a private cloud account. 3 months of documentation. Every bank record, every property filing, every insurance document, the shell company registration, the PI firm's number, and the call log. I opened a personal checking account at a bank Marcus had no connection to and began slowly, carefully redistributing my portion of marital assets, the amounts my attorney confirmed I was legally entitled to access. And then I did something that changed the direction of everything. I drove to a small town outside Asheville called Black Mountain. Population under 10,000. Green Hills, a main street with a coffee shop and a used bookstore. A place where nobody knew my name. I rented a small furnished apartment there, under a holding company Patricia had established for exactly this purpose, and for the first time in 6 years, or maybe longer, I exhaled. I drove back to Charlotte. I continued the performance, but I had somewhere to go when it was over. She secretly rented an apartment, transferred assets, built an escape route, all while sleeping next to the man who betrayed her. If you are watching this channel for the first time, subscribe right now. Every story on this channel ends the same way, with her winning. You do not want to miss what happens next. It was Patricia who introduced me to Raymond Goss. Raymond was 62. Retired from the Mecklenburg County Sheriff's Office after 27 years, the last 12 as a financial crimes investigator. He ran a small private investigation practice out of a converted house near downtown Charlotte. He was quiet in the way that men become quiet when they've seen things they can't unsee. He listened more than he talked. He asked exactly the right questions, and none of the wrong ones. "The pie firm your husband's been using," Raymond said at our first meeting, leaning back with a coffee going cold beside him. "Do you have any idea what he was asking them to look for?" "I assumed he suspected I might figure things out," I said. Raymond nodded slowly. Or he was protecting something else. He asked for a copy of the pie firm's number and the call frequency. He told me he'd make some inquiries. He had contacts in that industry. It was smaller than people realized. 2 weeks later, Raymond called me and asked me to come in. He set a manila folder on the desk between us and opened it without drama. Inside was a printed email thread, obtained through entirely legal means, Raymond was careful to note, between Marcus and the pie firm. Marcus hadn't been watching me because he feared I'd find the second family. He had been watching me because he was planning to leave me. And he needed documentation of my daily patterns, my routines, my contacts. He was building a case to argue that I was unstable, paranoid, emotionally erratic. He was going to file first. And he was going to try to discredit me before I ever had the chance to speak. Raymond folded his hands on the desk. "He's not just hiding a secret," Raymond said quietly. "He's been running a long con." The week Raymond made that discovery, something changed in my daily life. A car I didn't recognize began appearing on my street. Different cars, actually, 2 or 3, that rotated on a schedule, always parked far enough away to be unremarkable. I noticed because I had become the kind of person who noticed everything. I told Raymond. He ran the plates on 2 of them, both registered to rental agencies, neither connected back to the pie firm. Someone else was watching. Then I came home one afternoon to find my back door unlocked. I was certain I had locked it. Nothing was visibly disturbed, nothing taken, nothing moved. But there was a faint smell, something chemical, like a cleaning product applied to surfaces that hadn't needed cleaning. I called Raymond immediately. He came that evening and walked every room. In my home office, behind the printer, he found a small black device the size of a thumb drive. An audio recorder, motion activated, placed within the past 72 hours. Raymond removed it without triggering it and handed it to a contact at a digital forensics lab. The recordings were handed over to my attorney. They contained 12 hours of audio, mostly silence, some phone calls, one conversation between me and Patricia that fortunately contained nothing that compromised our legal strategy. But it told me everything I needed to know about how far Marcus was willing to go. Raymond filed a report with the Charlotte Police Department. Breaking and entering. Illegal surveillance. The investigation was opened. 3 days later, I received a text on my personal phone from an unknown number. 6 words. "You should stop before this gets worse." I screenshotted it. I forwarded it to Raymond and to Patricia, and then I kept going. Because threats are what people make when they've run out of other options. Raymond had been doing his own quiet digging, and what he brought me next stopped me cold. The pie firm Marcus had been using, the same one routing surveillance on me, had a second client in its records connected to Marcus's name. Not Marcus hiring them. Renee. Renee Caldwell had hired the same pie firm 2 years earlier to investigate Marcus. She had suspected something was wrong, too. Marcus figured out something was happening the way guilty people always do. He felt the absence of control before he could name the source. He noticed I had stopped asking questions, stopped reacting to his dismissals, stopped showing the small anxious behaviors he had spent years cultivating in me. He came home one evening in early November with flowers. Tulips. He hadn't brought me flowers in years. He was warm at dinner, attentive. He asked about my work, my clients, my week. I answered everything pleasantly and revealed nothing. 2 days later, he called me from what he said was a work trip to Nashville. He said he missed me. He said he'd been thinking about us, about how much distance had grown between us, about maybe seeing a couples counselor. I said that sounded like a wonderful idea. 3 days after that call, I checked the shell company account. He had moved $40,000 out of Holloway Meridian Consulting and transferred it to an account I had never seen before. I documented it and sent it to Patricia. She filed that afternoon. Marcus received the divorce petition on a Thursday morning. I know this because Raymond's contact confirmed delivery. He called me 4 times that day. I didn't answer. His 5th call came from Renee's number. I didn't answer that one either. He called 4 times. Then he called from Renee's number, and she did not answer either one. If you know someone who needs to hear a story like this right now, share this video with them and drop a comment. What would you have done when that phone rang? Marcus drove to the house that evening. I had expected this. I was sitting in the living room when he came in. Raymond was parked 2 houses away. Patricia had advised me to record the conversation, which was legal under North Carolina law as a one-party state. Marcus looked like a man whose architecture had collapsed. He was composed on the surface, but I could see what was underneath. Not remorse, not guilt, calculation. He was still running scenarios. "We can figure this out," he said. "I know we can," I said. "Diane." "The petition has been filed, Marcus. Patricia will be your point of contact from here." He showed up at her door with nowhere left to run. And she sat there, calm, prepared, completely in control. Comment one word that describes how you feel about this woman right now. One word. I want to read every single one. He sat down across from me. He took a breath. "How long have you known?" "Long enough," I said. "I was going to end it," he said. "With Renee." "I was going to, Marcus." I said his name the way I might say the name of a number that didn't balance. Flat. Factual. I have the shell company records. I have the property deed. I have Avery's school documents. I have the insurance policy. I have the audio recordings from the device that was placed in my home. I have the threatening text. I have the PI communications. And I have the $40,000 you moved 3 days ago, which my attorney has already flagged as fraudulent dissipation of marital assets. He went very still. "I'm not angry," I said. "I want you to understand that. I'm not going to scream at you. I'm not going to make a scene. What I am going to do is make sure every single financial decision you made in the last 8 years is examined in full, in a courtroom, with documentation." He opened his mouth. "I also want you to know," I said, "that Renee hired investigators 2 years ago. She's been building her own file. She knows you told her you were divorced. She knows her name shouldn't be on that deed the way it is. She has her own attorney now." The color left his face. "You two have a lot to talk about," I said. "But not with me." I stood up. I picked up my bag. I'll be staying elsewhere. The house and all associated documentation will be handled through Patricia's office. Please don't come by again without her written approval. And I walked out the front door. Raymond pulled around from down the street and waited. I got in the car. Neither of us spoke for a minute. "You good?" he asked. "I'm going to be," I said. The divorce was finalized 11 months later. The forensic audit I had compiled became the evidentiary backbone of the proceedings. The court found Marcus had deliberately concealed and misappropriated marital assets across 6 years: the shell company, the Raleigh property, the hidden accounts. North Carolina family law does not look kindly on financial fraud inside a marriage. I received the Charlotte house, 53% of the retirement accounts, and a structured settlement that Patricia described as one of the cleaner wins her firm had seen in a high-asset case. Marcus retained an attorney. Then a second one. The filing against him for illegal surveillance and breaking and entering resulted in a plea agreement, no jail time, but a permanent public record. His consulting firm's reputation did not survive the financial fraud findings being entered into public record. 3 of his major clients terminated their contracts within 60 days. I did not celebrate. I want to be honest about that. There was no moment of triumph that looked the way people imagine revenge looks. What there was a morning in Black Mountain, the little town I had found in the middle of all of this, where I sat on the porch of that small apartment with a cup of coffee and watched the fog lift off the hills, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Like myself, I never went back to the Charlotte house to live in it. I sold it. The proceeds went into my retirement account and a college fund I quietly established for Avery, anonymously, through a trust. I have never been able to fully explain why I did that. Maybe because none of this was her fault. Maybe because I know what it's like to find out the ground beneath you was never solid. I still live in Black Mountain. I took a consulting contract with a firm that handles forensic work on complex divorce cases. The particular irony in that is not lost on me. I don't talk to Marcus. I don't need to. I don't know what became of him and Renee. I don't follow it. That part of my life closed like a door, and I have not stood at it, wondering what's on the other side. Some people ask me if I forgave him. I tell them the same thing every time. Forgiveness is for me. And I'll get there. In my own time. At my own pace. Without anyone's permission. What I know is this. I spent 16 years inside a lie that someone else built. And when I found out, I didn't fall apart. I got organized. I got quiet. I got precise. And I got out. If this story landed somewhere true for you, something you have been carrying quietly, leave a comment below. You do not have to explain it. Just let me know you were here. And if you know someone who needs to hear a story about a woman who chose precision over panic, share this with them right now. They might need it more than